welcome to the garden. Today I'm going to be harvesting my black beans. You know they're perfectly ripe when the pods dry out and turn into this kind of papery texture. You can actually harvest these a little bit sooner when the pods are still yellow and just leave them on the plant and they'll dry on the vine. That'll give you about 2 extra weeks so that you can plant something new. But you do want to harvest these as soon as the pods dry out. They can actually grow mold on the outside, and if it's particularly humid, that can spread really fast and actually ruin your beans. Beans are one of the easiest plants to grow. They can be sown in spring, summer, or autumn, and they're ready to harvest in only a few months. So you can grow several batches of beans over the course of a year. So these are ready to plant, and we could do a whole nother round if we wanted to. I love that when you plant one little bean, you just get dozens back per plant, sometimes even close to 100. I'm only going to save about a handful to plant this autumn, maybe 1 or 2 handfuls to plant in spring next year, and then we'll eat the rest. But to cook these, we want to boil them for quite a while, and sometimes you get 6 or 7 beans per pod. Other times you might just get 1. You'll often get little shriveled ones like this. We're just going to toss that. Now if we can get one to split open perfectly in half without disturbing the beans, you can kind of see a little bit of how they grow. So you'll notice how the beans actually form on opposite sides, alternating, kind of like a zipper. These ones have actually squeezed together in the pod, but they're super easy to shell when they're dry like this. They just fall right out. I did find a couple that weren't quite dry yet. You'll see there's a huge difference in the texture. You can just feel the moisture in there. So I'm going to let these dry out until they're papery. So now we can just either split them open individually or just kind of... So it goes pretty quick. And we can pick out the individual shells. Just make sure we've got every single last bean. Once you get down to the fine stuff, just blow away the chaff. That's all the little bits on the inside here. It's kind of flaky bits. There's also a few dried leaves and stems that we could maybe pick out. So that's a pretty decent harvest for just a few little containers. Now if you were to plant these out in the ground in long rows, you could get massive harvests. And these are so high in protein and fiber, they're actually one of the most efficient plants to grow for a healthy diet. These will store extremely well, but you want to let them dry out and breathe. You don't want to seal them up in a plastic bag or a Tupperware container because there's a lot of extra moisture still in the beans, even though they look fairly dry. It's a little bit late to plant peppers and tomatoes, and it might actually be a little early to plant cool weather crops like carrots and peas. But I'm going to plant a whole bunch of stuff and just see what comes up. But before we plant anything, I want to make sure and fill this container in a little bit more. So the first thing I'm going to do is just fluff it with a pitchfork. Over time the soil gets compacted and settles in, so it can actually be pretty dense. So that actually gives us a couple inches of more height. Now I'm going to add a little bit of potting soil and some dried leaves. You can shred these up too. That way they mix in really well and they'll break down really quickly. This actually, over time, improves the body of the soil. Because these are dry, they're actually going to break down really quickly. I do want to try and bury the leaves. Anything on the surface is going to get in the way of our seeds. And of course, there's no better way to revitalize a container than by adding compost. So I'm going to plant a whole bunch of mostly cool weather vegetables. I'm going to start at the back with the taller plants. These are going to be furthest away from the sun, so they're not going to be shading out the shorter plants, which we'll put up front. So that'll be our spinach, and then we could maybe do some carrots, celery in the middle, peas at the back, and I might sneak a few onions in here on the sides. I could also plant some parsley back in here. Sprinkle some onions here. Oh, there's some parsley here and here. Add a couple carrots. Plant some celery right in the center. That gets fairly large. Do a generous sprinkle of spinach right across the front. And then mix a few in throughout too, just to fill in those gaps if there are any. And finally at the back, we'll plant a few of our peas. Now to plant the peas, I'm just going to press them into the soil. Just about an inch or so down. And then the rest of our seeds, we could either sprinkle with some more compost and do a no-dig method, or just fluff them into the soil like this. And the final step is just to water them in. So I'm going to do this gently and come back and water a few different times. That way we don't disturb the seeds by flooding them and floating them to the surface. And here they are after just a couple weeks. So you can see we're getting some beautiful spinach. I'm actually starting to even see the first true leaves. So even though it's still pretty warm during the day, up in the 80s and even 90s, the cool nighttime temps are keeping these cool weather crops happy. And you might be able to notice a few black beans actually slip through. So this is a black bean here. We've got peas at the back with parsley, onions, spinach, all sorts of goodies. And we've actually got a couple black beans in this one. And this one looks really big. I think I'm going to pull that though because I really want this spinach here. But we can plant another round of beans in a different container. So if you're growing black beans, now's a great time to harvest and plant some cool weather crops. Or you can plant a new batch of black beans and they should be ready in just a few months. So I hope you give this a grow in your garden. Thank you so much for watching and we'll see you next time.